Naira was a warrior, a fierce fighter from a powerful alien race known for their strength and skill in battle. Her people had conquered many worlds, their reputation spreading like wildfire through the stars. As a member of the elite warrior caste, Naira had fought in countless battles, always emerging victorious. She was strong, fast, and skilled in combat. To her, there was nothing more important than strength, both physical and mental. She believed that only those who could fight and win had a place in the universe. And then there were humans. Naira had heard stories about the strange little creatures from Earth, but she had never taken them seriously. In her eyes, humans were weak, too fragile, too emotional, and not made for war. They relied on their technology and numbers, hiding behind walls and weapons, but they lacked the true warrior spirit. Naira often heard other warriors laugh about how easily humans could be defeated, and she agreed with them. How could a race so small and so weak ever stand up to real warriors? One day, she was sent on a mission to a remote human settlement on the edge of known space. It wasn't a place of any strategic importance, just a quiet world where humans lived out their lives, minding their own business. Naira was told that some human settlements had been attacked by hostile alien forces, and she was to observe and report back. There was no real threat, only a few skirmishes, but Naira was curious to see for herself what kind of people humans were. As Naira landed her ship on the outskirts of the settlement, she noticed the strange calmness of the place. The buildings were simple, and the people appeared to go about their daily routines without fear. Naira's gaze fell upon a group of humans gathering at a market. They seemed peaceful, yet something about their calmness struck her as weak. They had no weapons, no armor, nothing to protect themselves. How could they be so vulnerable? Then, a loud roar broke the silence. Naira's sharp senses immediately identified the sound. It was a creature, large and dangerous, approaching from the forest. The humans around her began to scatter, running in all directions. Panic filled the air, and Naira couldn't help but roll her eyes. There they were, just as she had expected, fleeing from the danger like frightened animals. But then, something unexpected happened. Among the panicked crowd, one human did not run. He stood still, facing the direction of the creature's approach. Naira narrowed her eyes, curious about this human who seemed different from the rest. The others were shouting, pushing each other to escape, but this man remained calm, his stance steady. Naira observed from a distance, unsure of what she was seeing. The human didn't seem afraid. Instead, he took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the area. He moved toward a nearby building, picking up a weapon from the ground. Naira could not believe what she was witnessing. Was he really going to fight the creature? She thought about intervening, but something stopped her. She had to see how this played out. The human was not running, not hiding. He was preparing for battle. The creature appeared from the trees, its massive form casting a shadow over the settlement. It charged toward the humans, its jaws open wide, but the lone human stood tall, his weapon raised. Naira felt her heart race as she watched the human face the beast head-on. This was no coward. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The beast roared, the human aimed, and Naira held her breath, waiting for the outcome. The beast charged forward, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Naira could see the terror in the eyes of the humans around her, but not the one man. He stood firm, weapon in hand, eyes locked on the incoming threat. The other humans scrambled, trying to escape, but the man didn't move an inch. His posture was solid, his grip steady, as if he had already accepted what was coming. Naira was amazed. She had seen many different species face threats, but none had stood their ground like this human. His bravery was unlike anything she had expected from a creature she considered weak and frail. The creature, a large reptilian monster with sharp claws and teeth, let out a deafening roar. It was fast, much faster than Naira had expected. The human raised his weapon, aiming at the creature's chest. Naira could see the sweat on his face, his breathing quick and shallow, but he didn't back down. The moment before the beast reached him, the human fired. The sound of the shot rang through the air. The blast hit the creature square in the chest, but the beast only stumbled back for a moment, more enraged than hurt. It swiped at the human, claws slashing through the air. But the man was quick, jumping to the side and dodging the attack with surprising agility. Naira was impressed. She had expected the human to freeze in fear or get crushed under the beast's attack, but instead, he moved with purpose, as if he had trained for this. Naira couldn't help but admire the human's quick thinking. He fired again, this time hitting the creature in the eye. The beast screeched in pain, momentarily distracted. The human seized the opportunity. He didn't waste a second. With a swift motion, he pulled out a blade and lunged forward, slashing across the creature's throat. Blood spilled out, and the creature's roar turned into a strangled gurgle as it collapsed to the ground. The human stood over the fallen beast, breathing heavily, his hand still gripping the blade. His chest heaved, but he was alive. Naira couldn't believe what she had just seen. A human had killed the creature, something she would have expected to take an entire squad of warriors to do. The humans around her were in shock. They had seen their worst fear vanquished by one of their own. Slowly, they started to gather around the man, some cheering, others staring in disbelief. Naira stepped forward, her boots crunching on the dirt beneath her, her gaze fixed on the human. He looked up, meeting her eyes. There was no fear in his expression. He was no hero. He was just a man who had done what needed to be done. But in Naira's eyes, he had just become something far greater. That was impressive, Naira said, her voice steady, but filled with genuine respect. The human nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Just doing my job," he replied, his tone humble, as if what he had just done was nothing extraordinary. But Naira knew better. She had seen many warriors, many fighters, but none like this human. She could no longer dismiss them as weak. Not after this. Naira couldn't get the image of the human out of her mind, the way he had faced the creature, unflinching, without hesitation. She had always believed that strength was in the body, in the ability to overpower your opponent. But this human had shown her something different, a strength born from determination and quick thinking. He was a warrior in his own right, even if he didn't know it yet. Her pride as a member of the elite warrior caste made her uncomfortable with the thought of a human being anything more than weak. She couldn't let this challenge to her beliefs go unanswered. If he was truly as strong as she had witnessed, then she needed to test him. It wasn't enough for her to simply respect him. She had to prove that humans were not warriors. So, Naira approached him, her footsteps heavy against the ground as she strode forward. The humans around her cleared a path, sensing the authority in her presence. The human, Kale, stood still, watching her with calm eyes. She could see that he had no fear of her. That, more than anything, intrigued her. "You're impressive," Naira began, her voice steady. "But I need to see for myself if humans truly possess the strength to fight. A true warrior doesn't just face a creature in battle. They face other warriors." Kale looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "You want me to fight you?" Naira's lips curled into a slight smile. "Yes, a duel. You and me. Let's see if you can survive." Kale hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "I've never backed down from a challenge." That was all Naira needed to hear. She unsheathed her blade, the metallic sound echoing through the air. Kale reached for his own weapon, a smaller, but no less effective, sword. He wasn't afraid, and Naira could see that he was prepared. The humans gathered around, watching the challenge unfold. Naira could feel their eyes on her, their whispers, but she didn't care. This wasn't about them. It was about proving her point, showing them that no human could stand against her. The duel began. Naira attacked first, her blade cutting through the air with precision. She was fast, fluid, a true warrior. Kale blocked her strike with surprising skill, his eyes focused, his stance solid. He moved quickly, dodging her next attack, and retaliating with a swift slash aimed at her side. Naira blocked it easily, but she was surprised at how quickly he was learning. He wasn't just reacting. He was anticipating her moves, adapting to her style. It wasn't like any human combat she had ever seen. The battle continued, each strike and parry growing faster, more intense. Naira felt herself pushing harder, faster, trying to overwhelm him. But Kale didn't falter. He was unpredictable, using the terrain to his advantage. He slid under her blade at one point, narrowly escaping a direct hit. For a brief moment, Naira found herself off balance. It was only a fraction of a second, but it was enough for Kale to strike again, this time grazing her arm. Naira stepped back, a small smile creeping across her face. She could feel a small cut on her arm, but the pain didn't matter. What mattered was the realization that Kale wasn't a coward. He wasn't weak. He was capable. "You're good," Naira admitted, her voice low but filled with respect. "You fight well for a human." Cal's breathing was steady, though his muscles were beginning to strain. "I told you. I don't back down." Naira paused for a moment, the sound of their breathing the only noise in the air. She couldn't help but feel a deep respect for this human, one that had earned her admiration. For the first time, she saw what true strength was, not in the physical blows, but in the resilience to never give up, no matter the odds. "This isn't over," Naira said with a gleam in her eyes. She wasn't finished testing him just yet. The duel had been intense, but Naira was far from satisfied. She had seen Cal's skill, but she needed more. To truly understand the strength of humans, she had to push him further. It wasn't just about physical strength. It was about willpower, determination, and the ability to keep fighting, even when the odds were against you. She had to see if Cal could withstand even more. Naira stepped back, her breath steady, her stance firm. Cal, though winded, stood his ground. His eyes never left hers, and despite the exhaustion in his face, there was no sign of fear. She could see the grit in his eyes, the kind of determination that made warriors great. Without warning, Naira attacked again, faster and more brutal this time. Her blade moved like lightning, aiming to strike Cal down before he had a chance to recover. She needed to test his limits, to see just how far he would go. Cal raised his sword, blocking her attack just in time, but the force of her blow sent a jolt of pain through his arms. He stumbled back, but he didn't fall. His eyes remained focused, and he quickly regained his footing. Naira felt a flicker of respect. Most would have buckled under her pressure, but Cal was different. He pushed forward, his movements more fluid this time, his strikes more calculated. He wasn't fighting like a man trying to win. He was fighting like someone who had been backed into a corner and had no choice but to survive. There was a rawness to his fighting style, an instinct that went beyond training or strategy. It was the kind of instinct Naira had only seen in the greatest of warriors. She was impressed. Not many could withstand her relentless attacks, let alone counter them. Cal's resilience was something she had never expected from a human. And yet here he was, still fighting, still standing tall, even as his body began to show signs of exhaustion. With every strike, Cal's breath grew heavier, but his resolve only seemed to strengthen. He was determined to prove himself. Naira's attacks were getting faster, more relentless, but Cal was adapting. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was anticipating her moves, reading her body language, and finding ways to use her own force against her. Naira could see that he was starting to find his rhythm. For the first time in their fight, Naira felt herself slow down. She was no longer just overpowering him. Cal was no longer simply dodging and blocking. He was attacking, pushing back. His movements were getting more confident, more fluid, and Naira couldn't help but feel the shift. As the battle raged on, Naira realized that Cal wasn't just a fighter. He was a survivor. He didn't have the raw power of her people, but he had something far more dangerous: the will to never give up. Every time she thought she had him cornered, he found a way out. Every time she thought he would falter, He stood taller. This was the strength she had been looking for. Finally, they paused, both of them breathing heavily, sweat dripping down their faces. The ground beneath them was littered with the marks of their fight, scratches, dents, and broken pieces of armor. They were both exhausted, but neither was willing to yield. Naira wiped the sweat from her brow and looked at Kale. There was no arrogance in her eyes, no superiority, only respect. "You fight with strength I didn't expect," she said, her voice soft but filled with admiration. "You don't give up, even when it seems impossible." Kale smiled, his chest heaving. "I don't know how to quit." Naira nodded, her thoughts swirling. The human in front of her had just proven something she hadn't been able to see before. Strength wasn't just in the ability to fight. It was in the will to endure, to keep going no matter the cost. And Kale had that in abundance. Naira sat down on a large rock, her body sore from the duel. She had always been confident in her abilities, proud of her strength and skills as a warrior. Yet, sitting here now, she felt something she hadn't expected: respect. She had come to this planet thinking humans were nothing more than weak, fearful creatures, unworthy of a warrior's attention. But Kale had shown her something different, something far more powerful than she could have imagined. As she watched him, Kale was still catching his breath, his sword resting by his side. His face was tired, but there was a light in his eyes, a fire that refused to go out. Naira had seen warriors fight before, but none had the kind of determination that Kale did. It wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about the will to keep going, even when the body screamed to stop. She had been wrong. Naira had assumed that strength came from size or power, that the strongest were the ones who could crush their enemies with brute force. But Kale's strength came from something deeper. It was the ability to fight when the odds were against you, to stand firm when everything around you was falling apart. He didn't need to be the strongest. He only needed the courage to face the challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. Kale wiped his face with the back of his hand, finally looking up at her. "I know I'm not as strong as you, Naira," he said, his voice calm but tired. "But I've fought for everything I have, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon." Naira nodded slowly. She had never heard a human speak like this before. To her, they had always been quick to run, to give up when faced with danger. But Kale was different. He didn't see defeat as an option. He saw it as just another challenge to overcome. "You're right," Naira said quietly. "You may not be as strong as me, but you are strong in ways I didn't understand before. Your will, your drive, it's something that can't be measured by physical strength alone." Kale smiled, though his face still showed signs of exhaustion. "That's the thing about humans. We don't have the strength of other species, but we have the heart to keep fighting. We fight for what we believe in." For a long moment, Naira was silent. She thought about what Kale had said. She had spent her life believing that strength was something you either had or didn't. That power was measured by physical ability. But Kale had just shown her that true strength wasn't always visible. Sometimes it came from the heart, the willingness to push forward, even when it seemed like there was no way to win. As she looked at him, something shifted inside her. She had come to this planet thinking she could teach the humans about strength. But now it felt as though Kale had taught her just as much, if not more. "I was wrong about you," Naira admitted, her voice soft. "About humans, I mean. You're not weak. You are warriors in your own way." Kale looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "You really think that?" "I do," she said. "I've never seen anyone fight the way you do. You may not have the same strength as other species, but you make up for it with something more important. You have the heart of a true warrior." Kale stood up straighter, a renewed sense of pride in his posture. "I won't let you down, Naira. I won't let any of us down." Naira stood as well, her body still aching from the fight. But this time, it wasn't just physical pain she was feeling. It was the realization that she had underestimated humanity, and now she saw them for what they truly were: survivors, warriors, and most importantly, Allies. You haven't, Naira said with a firm nod. You've already proven more than I ever expected. The two of them stood together, the bond of respect and understanding growing between them. Naira had come to this world expecting to teach, but it seemed she was the one who had learned the most. The quiet of the settlement was shattered by a loud rumble. Naira's sharp senses immediately picked up the change in the air. The faint sound of engines grew louder, quickly followed by the screech of metal and the unmistakable roar of alien ships descending from the sky. A large fleet of enemy warships had appeared on the horizon. They were here to invade. Kale, standing beside Naira, tensed as he saw the dark shapes in the sky. His expression hardened. The calmness that had settled over him earlier was gone, replaced by the focused determination of a man who knew what was coming. "They're here," Kale said quietly, his voice steady but filled with urgency. Naira's eyes narrowed as she studied the ships. These weren't ordinary invaders. The ships were massive, heavily armored, and armed to the teeth with weapons designed to devastate entire cities. It was clear they had no intention of negotiating or leaving. They had come to conquer. "They'll wipe this place off the map if we don't stop them," Naira said, her voice colder now. She turned to Kale, a new resolve in her eyes. "We need to prepare. Gather every weapon you have, every human who can fight. We don't have the luxury of waiting for reinforcements." Kale didn't hesitate. He nodded and turned to rally the people of the settlement. Within minutes, he was organizing groups, directing them to arm themselves and prepare for battle. Naira watched, impressed by how quickly he took charge. Despite the odds, the humans were ready to fight. They weren't running. They weren't hiding. They were standing firm. "Come on," Kale shouted to the others. "Get into position. We're not giving up this place without a fight." Naira looked around at the humans, some of them barely trained for combat, yet all of them were determined. She had seen fear in their eyes before, but now she saw something else. Bravery. This was no longer about fighting for survival. This was about defending their home, their lives, and their future. It was a fight for something worth protecting. Naira, who had been a warrior all her life, knew that this was a battle unlike any other. The enemy would not be easy to defeat, but these humans were not going to back down. She would fight alongside them, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. These humans had earned her respect, and now she would fight for them, just as they were fighting for each other. The first wave of enemy ships landed just outside the settlement. The ground shook as they released their soldiers, fierce and ready for destruction. They were not interested in negotiation or surrender. They were here to conquer and to kill. Kale led the charge, a human soldier standing beside a powerful alien warrior. Naira was by his side, her battle armor gleaming in the light of the alien ships. Together, they were an unstoppable force, a human and an alien, united in a cause bigger than themselves. The battle was brutal. Explosions lit up the sky as the humans fired their weapons at the invaders. Naira fought with a fury she hadn't felt in years. Her sword cut through the air, taking down enemy soldiers with deadly precision. Kale fought beside her, his movements quick and unpredictable. He was not the strongest, but he was smart. He used the terrain to his advantage, outmaneuvering the enemy, striking when they least expected it. For every alien they took down, it felt like another victory. But they knew this was only the beginning. The enemy wasn't going to give up that easily. As the battle raged on, Naira couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. These humans were fighting with everything they had, and they were proving that strength wasn't always about raw power. It was about heart, and the humans had heart in abundance. Kale stood beside her, facing the enemy with the same determined look in his eyes. "We're not losing this," he said, his voice strong. Naira smiled, feeling the same fire in her chest. "No, we're not." The battle raged on for hours. The sky was filled with the smoke of explosions, and the ground shook with the heavy thuds of alien boots hitting the dirt. Naira fought with all her might, her blade flashing through the air. cutting down enemy soldiers one after another. The humans around her fought with surprising skill, using the knowledge of their terrain to strike at the invaders. But despite their bravery, the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. The human resistance was beginning to falter. Kale was at the front, rallying the humans, encouraging them to hold the line. He moved with purpose, taking down a soldier here and there, but he was clearly tiring. Naira could see it in his eyes. He was pushing himself to the limit. She, too, was feeling the weight of the battle, her body aching from the relentless fighting. But there was no time to rest. They had to win, or they would lose everything. Then, in the middle of the chaos, something unexpected happened. Naira was struck by an energy blast that sent her flying backward. The force of the impact knocked the wind out of her, and she struggled to regain her balance. She looked around, her vision blurred, trying to spot the source of the attack. Her head swam, but there was no time to waste. The invaders were closing in, and they were relentless. Kale was nearby, helping the group of injured humans to safety. When he saw Naira fall, his face hardened, and he rushed toward her without hesitation. "Naira," he shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "Are you okay?" Naira groaned, pushing herself to her feet. Her armor was cracked, and blood dripped from a wound on her side. She knew she couldn't keep fighting like this. They were outnumbered, and their resources were running low. But there was something in Cal's eyes that made her realize this wasn't over. He wasn't ready to give up, and neither was she. "I'll be fine," she said, her voice gritted with pain. "We need to get back in the fight. The humans are holding on, but not for much longer." Kale nodded, determination in his eyes. "Then we fight, together." Naira took a deep breath, steadying herself. She could see the humans around her fighting with everything they had, their strength not in their bodies but in their spirits. Kale had shown her that strength wasn't just about physical power. It was about the will to survive, the drive to keep going no matter what. And now, as she stood beside him, she knew they couldn't lose. With a renewed sense of purpose, Naira grabbed her weapon and charged back into the fray. Kale was right beside her, fighting with the same intensity, the same resolve. They cut through the enemy lines, working as one unit, their movements coordinated and precise. The invaders had underestimated them, but now they were starting to see just how dangerous a united human and alien force could be. The tide of the battle began to shift. The enemy, surprised by the unexpected resistance, started to retreat. The humans, emboldened by their newfound strength, pushed forward, taking back ground they had lost earlier. Naira fought with everything she had left, her blade flashing through the air as she cleaved through the invaders. Kale fought by her side, his movements sharp and efficient. Together, they were unstoppable. The humans had found their courage, and Naira had found something she hadn't expected, an ally in a human soldier who was more than just brave. He was a leader, and his belief in his people was the strongest weapon they had. As the last of the invaders fled, Naira and Kale stood together, breathless but victorious. The humans had done it. They had held their ground. And in that moment, Naira realized something profound. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for each other. And that made them stronger than any enemy they would ever face. Kale turned to Naira, his face covered in sweat and dirt, but his eyes full of pride. "We did it." Naira nodded, a rare smile crossing her face. "Yes, we did. You were right all along, Kale. You humans are not cowards. You are warriors." Kale smiled back, his determination still burning in his eyes. "We always will be." The aftermath of the battle was quiet, but the air was thick with tension. The dust from the explosions still lingered, coating everything in a fine layer of dirt. The ground was littered with debris, and the remains of the enemy soldiers were scattered across the battlefield. The once peaceful settlement had become a war zone, but it was a war zone that had been fought with courage, determination, and unity. Naira stood at the edge of the battlefield, her eyes scanning the scene. Her body was battered and bruised, but she was alive. The humans had done it. They had won. She could hardly believe it. After hours of relentless fighting, the invaders had retreated, and the humans had held their ground. She had fought by their side, and for the first time in her life, she truly understood what it meant to be strong, not in the way she had always thought, but in the way that humans fought for what they believed in. Cale walked up beside her, his face tired but triumphant. He had led the charge, inspiring the others with his resolve. Naira couldn't help but feel a deep respect for him. He had proven that strength came in many forms, and it wasn't always about being the biggest or the strongest. It was about having the courage to stand up when everything seemed hopeless, and to keep fighting, no matter the cost. "You did it," Naira said, her voice filled with admiration. "You and your people." Cale nodded, looking out at the settlement that was now safe, though it had suffered damage. "We did it together. But we couldn't have done it without you." Naira looked at him, surprised. "Without me?" Cale smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "Without your strength, without your belief in us. You didn't just fight for us. You fought with us. And that made all the difference." Naira was silent for a moment. She had never thought of herself as a part of something bigger. She had always fought alone, for her own honor and glory. But now, standing here, she realized that there was more to being a warrior than just personal achievement. The true strength of a warrior was in their ability to fight for others, to stand side by side with those they cared about and protect what mattered most. And in this battle, that was exactly what she had done. "You're right," Naira said softly. "I came here thinking that humans were weak, but now I see the truth. You're not weak. You're strong in ways I never understood." Cale looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "It's not just about strength. It's about heart. And we've got plenty of it." Naira nodded. She had seen that heart in the humans' determination, in their willingness to fight even when the odds were stacked against them. She had learned more about humanity in the last few hours than she ever had before, and she was proud to call them allies. As the humans began to gather, tending to the wounded and making preparations to rebuild, Naira felt a sense of peace settle over her. The battle was won, but the war for their survival wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, more enemies to face, but she knew now that the humans were not to be underestimated. They had proven themselves, and she would fight beside them, not just as a warrior, but as a friend. Cale turned to her, his voice low but filled with a quiet confidence. "We've won today, Naira, but there's more to come. We'll face it together, won't we?" Naira met his gaze, her eyes steady. "Yes," she said, her voice resolute. "Together." And with that, they both looked out over the battlefield, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. But no matter what came next, Naira knew one thing for certain. The humans were not to be underestimated. They were warriors. The days after the battle were filled with a mix of exhaustion and relief. The settlement had survived, and though it had been scared by the invaders' attack, there was a sense of hope in the air. Naira had stayed with the humans, helping them rebuild and heal, not just physically, but emotionally as well. The wounds of battle ran deep, but there was a strength in the humans that made them push forward. They were determined to restore what they had lost, and Naira was proud to be a part of that. As she worked alongside Cale and the others, Naira found herself reflecting on everything she had learned. She had arrived here with preconceived notions, seeing humans as weak, fragile beings who were no match for the forces of the galaxy. But now, after everything they had endured, she knew the truth. Humanity was not weak. In fact, they were some of the strongest beings she had ever encountered. Cale had been the one to open her eyes. He was just one human, but in his actions, she saw the power of the human spirit. He had stood against impossible odds, fought to protect his people, and never once had he given up. Naira had always believed that strength came from physical power or sheer force of will. But Cale had shown her that strength could come from something far deeper, something more important. One afternoon, as they were working to clear debris from the town square, Naira paused for a moment to watch Kale. He was giving orders, organizing a group of humans to help rebuild a nearby building. His leadership was natural, and there was a quiet confidence in his movements that commanded respect. He wasn't doing this for glory or for personal gain. He was doing it because it was the right thing to do. The humans were following his lead, trusting him, and working together to heal the wounds of war. Naira felt a sense of admiration for Cal. She had never seen a leader like him before, someone who led not through power or dominance, but through heart. And for the first time, Naira realized something that took her by surprise. She had been wrong about humans all along. They weren't just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with. As Kale approached her, wiping sweat from his brow, he offered her a tired but genuine smile. "How's the progress on the west side?" he asked, eager to hear her thoughts. "It's coming along," Naira replied, her voice calm. But there was a warmth in it now that hadn't been there before. "Your people have done well. You've shown them the way." Cal's smile widened, though he was clearly exhausted. "I'm just one person. It's everyone working together that makes the difference." Naira nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "No, Cal. You've led them. You've shown them what it means to fight, not just for survival, but for each other. That's what makes you a true leader." Kale stopped for a moment, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and humility. "I never thought of it that way. I was just doing what needed to be done." Naira chuckled softly. "That's the way of true leaders. They don't see themselves as anything special. They just do what needs to be done." For a long moment, they stood there together, watching the humans work, each person contributing in their own way. Naira felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had come here expecting to teach the humans, but it was they who had taught her something far more important. They had shown her that strength wasn't just about fighting. It was about standing together, fighting for what you believe in, and never giving up, no matter the cost. Naira glanced at Kale, her heart filled with gratitude. "I was wrong about you, Kale. About all of you." Kale met her gaze, his eyes sincere. "No, Naira, you just didn't know. But you do now, and that's what matters." For the first time, Naira truly understood. The humans were not the weak creatures she had once thought them to be. They were warriors in every sense of the word, and she was proud to call them her allies. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the settlement, Naira and Kale stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they knew they could overcome anything. The universe had underestimated humanity, but Naira had learned the truth. No one should ever make that mistake again. The settlement was slowly coming back to life. The scars of the battle were still visible, but the people of the town were rebuilding with a quiet determination. Naira worked alongside them, her strength and skills an invaluable asset. The humans had accepted her as one of their own, not just because she was a warrior, but because she had fought with them, stood beside them, and learned from them. Kale was still at the center of it all, guiding the humans as they worked to restore their homes and their lives. He was a leader, not because of his power or position, but because of his heart. Naira had watched him closely, seeing how his calm leadership inspired those around him. He was the true strength of this settlement, and Naira had come to realize that he was the true warrior. As the days passed, Naira found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. She had come to this world as an outsider, thinking that humans were nothing more than fragile creatures. She had been wrong. The humans had shown her that true strength wasn't about raw power or fierce fighting alone. It was about resilience, unity, and the will to protect what you loved. Kale had led them to victory, but it wasn't just his actions that had won the day. It was his belief in his people. One afternoon, Naira found herself walking through the town square, where she had once seen only fear and uncertainty. Now, the place was filled with laughter and activity. Children ran through the streets, playing games, while the adults worked together, repairing the buildings and gathering supplies. The sense of community was strong, and Naira could feel it in the air. These humans had not only survived the invasion, they had thrived in its aftermath. She paused for a moment, watching Kale as he worked with a group of humans to organize the rebuilding efforts. He looked up and saw her standing there, a tired but proud smile crossing his face. "How's everything going on your side?" he called out, his voice full of genuine concern. "Better than expected," Naira replied, walking toward him. "Your people are incredible. I never imagined they could come together like this." Kale shrugged, his expression humble. "We've had to learn to rely on each other. We don't have the luxury of doing things alone." Naira nodded, her thoughts drifting to everything she had learned since arriving here. "You're right. It's not about one person being strong. It's about everyone coming together and fighting for the same cause." Kale looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "And we couldn't have done it without you. You showed us that we could be more than just survivors. You helped us see that we could be warriors." Naira felt a warmth in her chest as she looked at Kale. "You've always been warriors. You just needed someone to show you that you had it in you." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Naira realized something important. She had come here thinking she was the teacher, the one with the wisdom and strength. But it was Kale and the humans who had taught her what true strength really was. They had shown her that strength wasn't always about fighting. It was about standing together, never backing down, and facing whatever came with unwavering courage. Kale's voice brought her back to the present. "We've got a lot of work to do, but I know we can do it. Together." Naira smiled, her heart filled with pride. Yes, together. And with that, the two of them stood side by side, ready for the challenges ahead. The battle was over, but their journey was just beginning. The humans had proven their strength, and Naira was proud to be part of their new future. There was no telling what the galaxy would throw their way, but Naira knew one thing for certain. As long as they had each other, they could face anything. Together, they were unstoppable.